I had always thought my marriage was solid, that my husband and I had built a life together based on trust, respect, and love. We had been together for over a decade, and we had shared everything: our dreams, our hopes, our plans for the future. Sure, there were occasional arguments, but nothing that could shake the foundation of our relationship, or so I thought. It was a cold Tuesday morning when everything changed. I had just woken up, still groggy from sleep, when I picked up my phone to check the time. But instead of a good morning text from my husband or the usual messages about our plans for the day, there was something far more shocking waiting for me. A message from him that would change my life forever. The text was brief, cold, and completely devoid of any emotion. It read, "I'm filing for divorce. It's over. I've moved on. Don't try to contact me. No explanation, no warning, no discussion. Just a final blow that hit me harder than I could have ever imagined." I stood there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind struggled to process what I had just read. I wanted to scream, to call him, to ask why, anything. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The words on the screen were so final, so definitive, that I couldn't fathom how everything had unraveled so quickly. One text message, that was all it took to destroy everything we had built together. The shock was overwhelming, but I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I picked up the phone to call him, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. But when I tried, the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. But each time I was met with the same cold silence. He had shut me out completely. I felt numb, like the world around me had stopped spinning. How could someone I had loved for so long just throw everything away with no explanation? It didn't make sense. And then the next blow came. I went to check our bank account, needing to know where things stood financially. To my horror, I found that our joint account was completely emptied, every penny, every dollar, gone. He had taken it all. I couldn't believe it. The man I had spent my life with, the man I had trusted with everything, had not only left me emotionally, but had also stolen from me. It was more than just the money. It was the betrayal, the deceit. He had not only broken my heart, he had taken away my security. I couldn't even begin to process the emotional whirlwind that had taken over my mind. The anger, the shock, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal were all consuming. I had spent so many years building a life with this man, had trusted him with my heart, my finances, and my future, and in a single moment, he had shattered all of it. The first thing I did was sit down and try to collect myself. I couldn't make sense of what had happened, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just let him get away with it. I spent the next few hours going over the text again and again, trying to understand how someone I had loved could be so callous, so heartless. The words kept running through my head. It's over. I've moved on. How could he say that after everything we'd been through? The life we had built wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And now, it was gone, reduced to nothing more than a few cold words in a text message. I stared at my phone, willing him to call or message, to explain himself, but of course, he didn't. He had already made his decision. I was nothing more than an afterthought in his life, but I wasn't about to let him take everything from me without a fight. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. I had no idea what my options were or how the divorce process worked, but I knew I had to take action. The lawyer assured me that I had legal rights, especially since we had a joint account. But there was more to it than just the money. There was the matter of our home, the assets we had accumulated together, and of course, the emotional toll this was taking on me. The emotional part was the hardest to deal with, and I couldn't even think about all the memories I had with him. It was too painful to go there just yet. I also began to take a closer look at our finances. My heart sank further as I realized the extent of what he had done. Not only had he emptied our joint account, but he had also made transfers to his own private accounts. It wasn't just a rash decision, it was calculated. I had no idea how long this had been going on, but now I knew that he had been planning this for some time. The emotional devastation was enough, but to know that he had planned this betrayal in such a cold, calculated way made it feel even worse. As I sat down to make a list of everything I needed to do, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even just about getting back what was rightfully mine. This was about regaining control. I couldn't allow myself to become a victim in this situation. I had to find a way to rebuild my life and take the next steps forward, no matter how difficult it seemed. I spent the next few days in a blur of phone calls, legal paperwork, and frantic conversations with my bank. I wanted to make sure I had access to some funds so that I wouldn't be left with nothing. The shock was starting to wear off, and anger began to replace it. Anger at what he had done, and anger at the fact that he thought he could just walk away and leave me to pick up the pieces. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't over. He had made a huge mistake. By treating me like this, he had not only betrayed me but had also underestimated my strength. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. I wasn't going to just let him destroy my life. I was going to rebuild, and I was going to do it on my terms. I wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. I would come out of this stronger than ever, and he would regret ever thinking that he could walk away without consequences. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster. One moment, I was filled with a sense of rage, and the next, I was swallowed by an overwhelming sense of loss. I couldn't believe what had happened. I had spent years building a life with him, planning for the future, and now it was all gone, taken away in an instant. It was hard to focus, but I knew I couldn't let this consume me. I had to keep moving forward. As I continued to get the legal processes underway, my lawyer explained the steps we needed to take to freeze the joint account and begin the legal proceedings for divorce. There were forms to fill out, meetings to attend, and documents to sign. It felt like an overwhelming task, but I knew I had no choice. I had to take control of the situation, even if it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Meanwhile, I started to hear from friends and family who were just as shocked as I was. They couldn't believe the way my husband had treated me. Everyone kept asking me the same question. Why did he do it? But I didn't have an answer. I didn't understand what had caused him to turn so cold, so quickly. What happened to the man I had loved? The man who had promised to stand by me no matter what? I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to piece together the signs I had missed, the moments that had seemed off, but nothing added up. It was as if everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. I spent days going through old photos, memories of trips we had taken, milestones we had shared. The pain of it all was almost unbearable. But I knew I had to get through this. I couldn't let myself drown in the sadness and confusion. I had to be strong. Not just for myself, but for the life I was going to rebuild. One evening, as I sat alone at my kitchen table, my phone rang. It was a call from a financial advisor who had been recommended to me. He explained that, in addition to freezing the joint account, we needed to track down all of the assets my husband had moved over the past few months. He mentioned something about hidden accounts and transfers that I hadn't even known about. The realization hit me hard. He had been planning this for a while. The man I thought I knew, the one who swore he was always honest and upfront with me, had been hiding things. He had been setting up this escape, this betrayal for months, and I had been completely unaware. The advisor walked me through the process of uncovering assets and securing my financial future. I felt a small sense of relief knowing that I wasn't entirely helpless in this situation. There were legal ways to track down his secret accounts, to recover the money he had taken from me, and to ensure that he couldn't just walk away without consequences. But as the financial advisor explained the situation, I realized that the financial aspect was only the tip of the iceberg. This was bigger than just the money. This was about trust, betrayal, and the future I had thought I would share with someone who turned out to be someone completely different. Days turned into weeks, and as I began to piece my life back together, I started feeling a strange sense of empowerment. Every phone call I made, every legal document I signed, was a step closer to taking control of my life again. It wasn't easy. It was a daily struggle to get out of bed and face the day, but I kept telling myself, I can do this. During this time, I realized something important. I had allowed myself to define my life through him. We had been a team, a partnership. But now, I was alone. And while that was incredibly painful, I knew it was also an opportunity for me to rediscover myself. I could no longer live my life through the lens of our marriage. I had to focus on myself, rebuild my own sense of self-worth, and move forward with the knowledge that I didn't need his validation anymore. I was enough on my own. The emotional pain still lingered, of course. There were days when I felt like I was suffocating, but the more I leaned into my strength and resilience, the more I realized I could face whatever was coming. The process of divorce wasn't going to be easy, but I had support. Friends, family, and even my lawyer became a team, and I wasn't in this alone. I had learned a hard lesson. Never let someone else define your worth. It wasn't about the money or the betrayal. It was about reclaiming my identity. And little did he know, this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. As the divorce proceedings continued, I began to realize that it wasn't just about recovering my finances. It was about finding my strength and rebuilding my entire life from the ground up. I had spent so many years being part of a partnership, relying on someone else, and now I had to rely on myself. It was a terrifying thought, but also a liberating one. I started focusing more on what I truly wanted. For the first time in a long while, I gave myself permission to dream again. I had spent years working for our shared future, for our plans, but now it was time to create my own future. I reached out to some old friends who had always supported me, and I began reconnecting with people who had drifted away during the years I had spent focusing on my marriage. I also sought out therapy, something I had never really considered before. I knew the emotional toll this had taken on me, and I needed help in processing everything I had been through. Talking to a therapist gave me the space to finally address all the feelings I had been bottling up. The anger, the hurt, and the profound sense of loss. One of the most important lessons I learned during these months was that healing isn't linear. Some days I felt strong, ready to take on the world, and other days, the weight of the betrayal would hit me all over again. There were moments when I would sit alone in my apartment, wondering what went wrong, questioning every decision I had ever made. But I pushed through those moments, reminded myself that I was doing this not just for me, but for my future. The financial recovery was slower than I had anticipated, but I wasn't in it for a quick fix. I was in it for the long haul. I worked with my lawyer to track down the hidden accounts, and over time we were able to start reclaiming some of what my husband had taken. It wasn't easy, but as I gained control over my finances, I also regained a sense of empowerment. But then came the moment I had been waiting for. One afternoon, I received a letter from Mr. Carter, my husband, with a settlement offer. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I knew that the emotional cost of what he had done would never be compensated by any amount of money, but it was something I had to deal with. After consulting my lawyer, we decided to take the offer. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about closing that chapter and moving on. However, the most surprising part of this entire experience came when I finally started thinking about what I wanted to do next. I had been so focused on surviving the storm that I hadn't given myself the space to think about what truly made me happy. After everything that had happened, I wanted to pursue a passion I had long buried, starting my own business. I had always been good with numbers and organization, and I had a desire to help other women who had been in situations like mine, starting over, rebuilding after betrayal. I began taking classes, researching the industry, and setting goals. I didn't have all the answers, but I had determination. I had survived the worst, and now I was ready to build something meaningful from the ashes of my past. I wasn't going to let the mistakes of the past dictate my future. The day I officially launched my business, I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't felt in years. The first few clients came in slowly, but the momentum was building. Every step I took forward was a step away from the life I had with him. a life that was defined by deceit and betrayal. Now I was defining my own life based on my values, my goals, and my vision for the future. As the months passed, I found a sense of peace I hadn't known since before the divorce. The betrayal would never fully disappear, but it had started to lose its power over me. I had taken back control of my life, and while the scars from the past would always be there, they were now a part of my story, not my identity. And then one day, when I least expected it, I received a call from him. It was the first time in months that he had reached out. His voice sounded uneasy, almost apologetic. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," he said, a strange mixture of regret and anger in his tone. "You should have just stayed with me. This could have been so much easier for both of us." I could feel my heart racing as I listened to him speak, but I knew, deep down, that this was my moment, the moment where I realized how far I had come. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "No, John, you were right about one thing. It could have been easier, but I don't want easy. I want better. And that's what I'm building for myself now, so no, I won't be coming back, and I'm not going to let you take anything else from me. I've moved on." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought he might say something more, but instead, he hung up, and I felt a weight lift off my chest. I wasn't holding on to anything anymore, not the past, not the pain, not the regret. I had let go. And for the first time in months, I felt truly free. As the months passed, I found myself growing stronger with every step I took. The pain of the divorce and the betrayal that came with it began to fade, but the lessons I learned stayed with me. The business I had built from scratch began to flourish. I poured my energy into helping others who had gone through similar experiences, offering them guidance and support as they rebuilt their own lives. It became clear to me that my story was not just about loss, but about resilience and empowerment. One day, as I sat in my office reviewing plans for a new project, I received a message from a familiar number. It was John, my ex-husband. He wanted to meet. I had mixed emotions about meeting him. On the one hand, I had moved on. My life was finally in a place where I felt empowered and in control. On the other hand, there was still a part of me that wanted closure, that wanted to finally understand why he had done what he did. So after some deliberation, I agreed to meet. We met at a small cafe, and as soon as I saw him, I felt a rush of memories. But this time, it wasn't the same. I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed. I wasn't the woman who had been desperate for answers. I was different now, stronger, wiser, and more at peace with myself. He sat down across from me, looking tired and worn. It was obvious he hadn't been doing well since the divorce. His once confident demeanor was now replaced with something else, regret, perhaps, or maybe the realization that his life had spiraled out of control. He was no longer the man I had once known, and I could see that he was struggling to find his place in the world. "I know I hurt you," he began, his voice low. "I made a huge mistake. I thought that by letting you go, I'd be able to fix everything in my life. But now, I see that all I did was destroy what we had. I ruined it." I listened quietly, not interrupting. I didn't feel angry anymore, or bitter. I had accepted that what had happened was beyond my control. The past was gone, and I couldn't change it, but I had learned to forgive, not for his sake, but for mine. "I've had a lot of time to reflect," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I've come to understand that what you did wasn't just about me. It was about your own fears, your own insecurities. But you know what? I've moved on. I'm not angry. I've rebuilt my life, and I'm happier now than I've been in years. I don't need closure from you anymore, John. I've found it on my own." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the weight of his actions finally sinking in. "I'm glad you're doing better," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I am truly sorry for everything." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle in my heart. "I've forgiven you. I've forgiven myself. We both have to live with our decisions, but I'm not going to carry the weight of what happened anymore. I've learned a lot from this experience, and I'm stronger because of it." We sat in silence for a few moments, and I realized that this conversation, this meeting, wasn't about getting answers from him. It was about closing a chapter and walking away with my head held high. I didn't need him or anyone else to define my worth. I had already done that for myself. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This was the last time I would ever let him or anyone else take away my sense of self. I was free. Free from the pain of the past, free from the betrayal. And most importantly, free to build the life I had always wanted, a life where I called the shots and where I made the rules. In the months that followed, I watched my business grow. I traveled more, spent time with friends and family, and did the things that made me feel alive again. I had become someone new, not just because of the challenges I faced, but because I had chosen to rise above them. And one day, as I looked around at the life I had built, I realized something important. The best revenge wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving myself right. I had taken my pain and turned it into something beautiful. I had become the person I was always meant to be.